Turns out he's a major cinephile.
They don't watch enough movies. It's a very simple formula.
And here we go.
Hey you, it's football season, and you know what that means? It's fantasy football season, even more important. Things are going great for my 2-0 Buffalo Bills. Things are pretty dark for the baby you can drive my Carsons 0-2. Going pretty close to 0-3 after this brutal Jaguars game on Thursday night. You may be wondering, hey Nick, I love sports as much as the next listener, but why are you trying to be Matt Berry up in here? I want my GD movie and TV news now. And to that I say, take a chill pill. We're gonna get there. I swear. This is just an intro. Now where was I? Yeah, right. Fantasy football. One of my true loves, passions in life. With the season kicking off and rewatching Big Mouth recently for episode 6 of the podcast, being reacquainted with Nick Kroll and others, I figured it was the time of the season to dive back into the league. What is the league, you ask? And to that one person who does not know what the show is, it's an FX sitcom about relatable, terrible people who are in a fantasy football league. From 2009 to 2015, this gem of a sitcom that's semi-improvised aired, and for the longest time, I considered this show the staple of quality, but more importantly, consistent quality, which is something you look for in a fantasy football flex player too. Sports all the time over this episode of the podcast, but stop. I am going to tell you why the show is the best sitcom out there, why you should watch it, and why you should rewatch it and watch it right now. So a bit more about the show. Some people talk about Friends, Seinfeld, The Office, How I Met Your Mother. The list goes on and on and on for sitcoms that some would consider the best, the brightest, the clear definition of the sitcom genre. But what happens in these? There's some jokes, a lot of sitting, talking, and I always feel like there's this huge focus on dating and love and romance. Not for this guy. Hell no. No rom-coms, dark depressing Nick. That's me. You guys know that by now. It's episode 8. You guys know what's for me. What's my viewing genre of pleasure? Well, before the league, I would say the best sitcom, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which is still one of my top 2. But I will say, something that has the absence of a laugh track makes things much better. I don't get laugh tracks. It was a different time. People having to have that weird laugh, it doesn't make sense to me. I hate it. Absolutely. The show should be able to be funny on its own. I don't want to know when to laugh at a joke. I don't need to be told. I don't need to be hit over the head and say, laugh now. This isn't an audience applause live show. If a joke is funny, if a show is funny, you will laugh on your own. Don't put laughter in the world. What a strange thing to break you out of the mesmerization and the world that you're becoming absorbed in. The laugh track just pops you right out of there. Garbage. And the league, the beautiful gem that it is, no laugh track to see. I know laugh tracks aren't a thing at all, but when people talk about sitcoms, a lot of the classics have laugh tracks. Get it out of there. Knock it off. Speaking of this sitcom, it is filthy. The crass humor, the absolute degenerate people. It is the right amount of relatable with real world people living their real lives. And there's that little extra. It's a little oversensitized. It's abstract. It's the real world plus. There's something a little different about it. And that's what makes it not just people sitting on a couch, but not just space drama. You know, there's that middle ground of it's in this world, but it's a little bit extra. It's not just people sitting in a coffee bar or in an office. It's about average people who live average lives, but the over-competitive oddities, the crazy, weird, reoccurring jokes, and just showcasing how things go so wrong for these people, it's hilarious. It's like the car crash you can't turn away from. When you think something's going well for one character, stop it. It's gonna go bad. Never get your hopes up for anything. Gosh, are we talking about Rick and Morty here? Stop it. No, we're talking about the league. But you may notice a common trend of things I like. Most sitcoms have nothing happened. The kids, the adults, the teenagers, young adults, whatever it is, they have to do something. The thing gets solved. There's some fun little jokes along the way. The episode ends. Everyone's happy. And when the next episode kicks off, barring very, very loose threads, nothing really matters. You could watch a random episode, no connective tissue to other episodes other than the same characters in the same setting. That's not for me. I was a script writing minor. I love my long connected stories. I will watch every Marvel movie, even if I don't want to watch it, just for the story. That's just how I am. But let's be real, I do want to watch every Marvel movie. It's just going to be what it is. Does it stink I have to wait till 2021 for the next one? Yeah, that's awful. But I will be there for all of them. Trust me. But back to sitcoms. Most of them, nothing happens. The episode ends, everything's okay. That's it. The League regularly has the characters getting close to success, be it in everyday life, trying to get a promotion, meeting a new partner, or something going really well in fantasy. And most of the time, things end awfully, not just for one person, for most people. They'll come in different ways, in different episodes. It may take a whole season for that terrible thing to happen to that one character who's seemingly going to get out of it unscathed. But at the end of the day, just like fantasy football, there's only one winner. And normally at the end of a season, one person's in a better spot, or sometimes even that one person is not in a better spot. And you better believe when the next season rolls around and that 1 or 2 episodes in, that person's high that they're in is going to come crashing down. Well, except for Taco, because he's always high. But we'll get to characters a little bit later. I also like how the show can be enjoyed with a random episode, like in many sitcoms before, but there's also a more serialized format to it. Most episodes either have continuing running storylines. Some episodes, if you watch the first one, followed by the next one, you wouldn't be able to get everything unless you watch that first one. You can't just put on a random episode of The League. To some degree you can, but there's more episodes that you'd have to really be binging through, watching through in sequential order. And I like that. I like the serialized episodes when it comes to this. Those running storylines are so important to me as a viewer. I think our guest John Mosho said it a few times talking about a few animated shows, but like those, this show throws 100 jokes at you. The difference is, where he, I think, would say maybe you laugh at a few, I still find myself not just haha laughing or telling myself that's funny, outwardly laughing watching the show. And this is my 4th or 5th time watching it through. I don't know what the difference is between why I can accept the crass humor here more than South Park. And that was something that I contemplated when doing a little bit of research and writing this episode was what makes me dislike the crass in South Park, but The League is pretty crass and disgusting at times. I mean, the things that happen to Kevin or the things that Kevin does are gross. Are they South Park gross? No, but they're as gross as can be in a comedy show. I mean, I would say It's Almost Sunny is similarly fairly grotesque in some of its jokes, but I think the reason why I can accept The League more than South Park is when it's in person, the crass is still a little grounded in reality, and it can't be so extra. Think of it as the opposite of Big Mouth Principle. If that show was ever made in live action, it would be an abomination and probably unwatchable for any semblance of decency. That show probably wouldn't be aired, put on anywhere. It wouldn't be able to be on Netflix, that's for sure. But somehow that animation gives a show about childhood puberty some semblance of you're able to digest it. And I think in the same way where The League as an animated show with some of the jokes, they'd probably go harder on the crass and it'd be more visceral than having it made to be based in reality. Although one of the last episodes of the entire series is a phenomenal animated episode with Jason Mantzoukas and Seth Rogen. That's all I'll say. It's weird, it's different, it's only once, but it is hilarious. So I've told you a little bit about the show, but why is it so good? For me, for starters, the cast is sensational. So let's take a look at this ensemble cast of the amazing, flawed friend group. Mark Duplass is probably one of the more known people post the league. He's been a part of the morning show and the Mindy Project. He plays the slacker who has too much time invested in the league, and all the guys are invested in the league and Jenny as well. But there's something that Pete takes it to such a different level. So he's always your most fantasy football driven guy, which I think leads to why he's the slacker in life, because he puts so much effort into this other thing, this hobby. And to me, he's actually the most relatable one. I think he was almost made that way to be your more everyday man. And I feel like when I watched it the first time, I would consider him the air quote main character. But this really is an ensemble show, and I love how he's always considered one of the best at fantasy football, and most things kind of work out for him, but they do make sure to ground him every so often, like everyone. It does feel like they're grounding Ruxin and Andre and Kevin Moore, but there are moments where they'll get Pete. Like, no one ever stays too high. And obviously one of the interesting things is when you look at what happens prior to the show, if you take a look at who wins a trophy the most versus where it ends, we never actually see him win another one during the 7 runs of the show. Spoiler alert. But once again, when we talk spoilers, the show ended in 2015, I believe. You know what I'm saying? We're done. We don't need spoilers anymore. It's not a spoiler warning. It's been 5 years. Since it ended. Many more, almost 10 years since it started. So I think we're fine. But always will appreciate what Pete is. He's sort of the fantasy nerd obsessor in all of us fantasy sport or football players. So Jonathan LaJoie is the only actor to never really take part in anything, mainly known after the league concluded its run. But his character, Taco, who's the stoner brother of Kevin, is in the show. There's actually a moment where they call him the Joe of the group. And I feel like watching the show, that's kind of still the case. His character is the one who most things go well for, but mostly because he's always high and he's a pretty weird, most people would consider abstract, useless life, but he's always doing his own thing and seems to be loving life that he's living. So pros and cons, right? It's how you perceive success. It could be a deep take. I know we're going maybe a little deeper on the league than people would anticipate, but here we are. He's always doing the weirdest things, and honestly, his inclusion is the main abstract part that is always weird to this group. There's grounded, but just terrible people. He is making everything into a guest bong, terrorizing people in a Mr. McGiblets, which is we'll call it a knockoff Barney suit. In real life, he's a comedian and a musician. Both of those things are on display as playing Taco, and actually, he wrote a ton of the music for the Lego movie too. But I think his character Taco is sort of the reason that the league can kind of tiptoe into those weirder places, because without him, it's 3 guys who have professions, 1 guy who's a little bit of a slacker, and they all obsess about fantasy football. But having this really weird abstract character leads to some of the stranger situations with these people who you may consider more normal, all-around people if you take away the fantasy part. So Nick Kroll is the most known actor on this show, and I don't know if I necessarily thought that while watching the show. You appreciate every character and every actor who portrays one of the main characters on this show, but you always kind of disliked him, and maybe that's why you didn't always root for him. But after watching, after his time with the league, he had his own sketch show, The Kroll Show, on Comedy Central that was gone way too soon. He has been a guest in What We Do in the Shadows, Sausage Party, Drunk History. He was also in the film Uncle Drew, which has honestly kind of a similar role to how he is played in the league. He's in Get Him to the Greek for a little bit, and he's in so many more things. But most importantly, Big Mouth, one of the creators, main actors. He is the most toxic character of the friend group. He's a perpetual liar, and I'd say the closest thing to a villain in the group. You gotta have someone to hate, and Nick Kroll is your guy in this group, which seems to be his character in a lot of roles. But like I said, it feels like everyone can relate to someone in the league, and he's that overconfident, always just dry and sarcastic guy, and some people are always going to root for him or relate to that guy. That's why the league is so good. Everyone has one character they can relate to, either fully or at some time in the show. So Stephen Rand as Izzy plays the commissioner of the league, Kevin, who is also one half of the fantasy power couple of Kevin and Jenny, played by Katie S. Ellen. He is always being belittled by his wife's fantasy football skills, and the show immediately picks up when Jenny officially joins the league, not as his shadow running his team, but as a member of the league in her own right. Stephen has not really been in a whole lot, but he has been in a few episode stints of New Girl and Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is kind of sad because I love how good he is in the show. He's the most disgusting man who is always second fiddle to everyone else in the league. I always feel a bit for him as a commissioner myself of the IC Alumni League, and their dynamic as a couple is amazing. This is a show about friends, some married couples, but it really is just about a bunch of friends who are joined together by their desire and love for fantasy football dominance and their mutual loathing of each other. Somehow it bonds them all together. Katie is one actor who I've actually seen in other things. She had a great stint in Legion for the first 2 seasons, and in that show she's actually one of the most normal characters. She was in the severely underrated show Revolution for a small stint, and she has a ton of film roles more recently. She is the foul-mouthed fantasy football expert in this show, and seeing the family life with 2 ultra-competitive parents while also trying to raise multiple children, it's just too perfect. And it hits on so many different types of people in the friend group. You know, you have single people, people in relationships, but they're all bonded together by this drive for this gaudy trophy about their reminiscing of their high school days, and just seeing how they all interact with each other and how this drive for this thing makes them do just absolutely crazy things, and seeing that from mostly a friend group, but seeing it sometimes through the perspective of a couple, it's pretty interesting. Just as a side note, this show has also inspired me. It's why I want to have a girlfriend, or if I'm lucky, a wife, eventually, to be in a fantasy league with. And ladies, I am single and available. So, any takers, let me know. I'm doing really bad in fantasy football this season, but give it time. I'm sure I'll get back to my glory of 2 in a row wins eventually. Paul Scheer is the friend that everyone makes fun of in Andre. I don't know if I realized this the first or even the second time watching around. The guys constantly make fun of his fashion, his bad jokes, the equivalent of the Archer running gag in phrasing, all while he is the most successful of them all. You have your average slacker friend, the sarcastic one, the high one, the disgusting one. Now you have the one they rag on. I have to say, you gotta love Andre because of how much he bounces back from all the crap he takes and how he is always gonna do his own thing. He may be the joke, but healthy, deeper meaning Nick can appreciate it. Also, if you are looking at who wins it, who wins the trophy, who wins the Shiva, he does win the league twice, more than anyone except for Pete, and you see Andre win it twice. Paul Scheer is a co-host of the popular podcast How Did This Get Made with Jason Mantzoukas, who we will talk about soon. He was also part of Black Monday, Veep, and Fresh Off the Boat. Before I go too much more into character things, I love that they did end up having everyone win it once. Pete is never seen winning it, but being the main champ prior to the show, you kind of get that build, and you see his drive throughout the show of trying to be, and normally acting like he's the best at what he does, because that's what he spends most of his time on. And having Taco win it once, but never seeing it, is something you always think of. You get to meet Taco and learn about him for 7 seasons, and you wonder, how did this guy ever win it once? And that's a question we will never know the answer to, sadly. Everyone else wins it at least once. I love how Kevin's championship has an asterisk on it, and how close people get when they finally win, what that looks like. The Kevin freak out in one of the holiday episodes is always one moment that I think I always, if I don't know how many memories I would say, oh, I remember the league because of this. But the Kevin holiday freak out in like season 2, where he's swearing at everyone, he's swearing at the holiday, he's swearing at his wife, his daughter, his friends, about how he works so hard as a commissioner, he never wins, and how he has to deal with all these people and all their problems. As a commissioner myself, do I deal with that much? No, we're a pretty online league. But so this scene always speaks to me in that I don't want to say it's a power trip being the commissioner of a 12-team fantasy football league, but a little bit, just a little bit. So bring up some characters who may not have started as main characters in the show, but besides Sophia, who is Ruxin's wife, let's talk about Jason Mantzoukas, becoming a staple of the show. He plays Rafi, who might have been considered, to some people, just a little too much for the show. Unlike Taco, where it is chaos but a bit more relaxed, Rafi is just a psychopathic person. And he's more disgusting than Kevin, he's more crazy than Taco. It just throws the whole narrative structure into chaos, and in the best kind of way. There is no redeeming qualities to Rafi, but it's the way that they can add another layer of just overall crazy to the show. And it's how we get Seth Rogen on this amazing guest actor role for multiple episodes. But before we go there, let's talk about an amazing connection the show has to Big Mouth. How many of these actors are in Big Mouth? Mark Duplass is one of Jay's brothers. Nick Kroll is obviously Nick Birch, one of the main characters. Jason is Jay Bilzerian, one of my favorite characters on Big Mouth, excluding Coach Steve. And Paul Scheer is the other Bilzerian brother, Kurt. You kind of don't recognize their voices always immediately. I don't know if I recognize Paul Scheer's voice immediately. But when I realized it and you heard it back, you kind of heard that hint of Andre. Just not there fully, but just a little hint there. So guest actors. They are a ton. Seth Rogen as Dirty Randy, the porn shooting pal of Rafi, those episodes that focus on them are amazing. Including the animated one. It was just a treat to have Seth Rogen, who's such a big name, in like 6 or 7 episodes. Brie Larson's in this. Ike Barinholtz as Frank the Body Gibbiotti, the guy who peaked in high school. The incomparable Jeff Goldblum as Ruxin's dad. Meghan Merkel. Keegan-Michael Kay. Dion Cole from my Conan days. I did meet him once, no big deal. TJ Miller, Thomas Middleditch, JB Smoove, Bob Odenkirk, and Snoop Dogg. This list is insane for people who either were one-off episode roles. Some of these people were in multiple episodes. This is a wild list, and this is just a fraction of the guest actors. I mean, Ike Barinholtz as the guy who peaked in high school to being just around and still that bully, and he shows up at the reunion, he shows up at tailgating. There's a part where Pete's dating his sister and seeing their relationship. It's just beautiful. We only get, sadly, Jeff Goldblum for a few episodes, but when he's Ruxin's dad and he does the Ruxin face, look, we love everything that Jeff Goldblum's in. The new Jurassic Park coming out is going to have him, Sam Neill, and Laura Dern. Super excited about. Bob Odenkirk works at a mall and mentions Cinnabon, and you gotta draw some fun ties to the first episode of Better Call Saul, and kind of all the in black and white flashbacky, flash forwardy moments to his career at Cinnabon post the events of Breaking Bad. It's just a fun little tie. Not only are the guest actors amazing, but they really went all in with NFL players, coaches, media personalities. Season 1, the show's just starting out, 6 episodes. One of those episodes has Terry Bradshaw. I mean, that's amazing. The guys are constantly making enemies with players like Antonio Gates, J.J. Watt, and more. Doing the Ruxin Shuffle with MJD and more, having an entire episode with the Dallas Cowboys stars and Jerry Jones at training camp. I love the Marshawn Lynch episode where they're having a joke about running it in after that brutal Super Bowl. Yes, Marshawn Lynch should have ran in. I love Marshawn Lynch as a Bills fan. His time with the Seahawks is great. His time with the Raiders is great. Obviously, his time with the Bills. His time on Westworld is great. Marshawn Lynch is a treasure. And the fact that he could be in this episode and make this joke and laugh about it and be in the league, amazing. Remember, he should have still probably gotten Best Guest Actor in a Drama Series for Westworld, but, Emmys are over. We'll move on. We'll go from there. Maybe his character's still alive. Maybe he'll be back for season 4. I don't know, but it would be appreciated. The best jokes have to come from Jay Cutler and the baby Cutlet, they call it, befriending temporarily Kevin and Jenny. For me, though, as the Bills fan I am, the best joke has to be the episode where they're talking about who's the smartest one in the group, and the episode talks about the Wonderlic test that all NFL players have to take, and the feature athlete in that episode is Harvard and Buffalo Bills alum and current Dolphins quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick. The fact that there are so many ties to the NFL to this abomination of a brutal, gross show that I love, it makes the world so beautiful and lived in. The show was great with those guest actors, don't get me wrong, but the NFL people, players, and organizations who wanted to be a part of it and were a part of it, it makes the show the gem that it is. It's a football show that has real football players with random people who are just into fantasy football. I mean, that's unreal. So this is an older show, right? 2009, 2015. Is it ancient? Absolutely not. Is it going to seem dated? No. But it's a little bit older. Why should you watch it today? So like fantasy football seasons of old, if you could look back at your history of who you drafted in 2010, 2008, you're going to see some names that clearly don't play anymore. That will either make you feel nostalgic, happy, annoyed, devastated, who knows. I'm always going to remember that time that I drafted Brett Favre in his last year. He wasn't as strong. And Randy Moss, in that one year, he wasn't as strong. I always remember the rough draft picks you've made, the bad choices you made based on players at the beginning of their career, the end of their career, injuries, what have you. This sort of brings that all back in a mostly fun, nostalgic way. It's a reflection period of football players you used to know. It was somebody that you used to know. Somebody. Right? Gautier? Remember that song? Exactly. You used to know about him. This is your reminder about that song. While there are still some active players in the show who are still currently in the NFL, as we said, Ryan Fitzpatrick, still a starting quarterback. There are those players that aren't that don't exist anymore in the league. Josh Cribbs, Maurice Jones-Drew, Chad Ochocinco, the Cutler himself, and many more. It will eventually wane a bit with that familiarity. But for me, it's still fun, and it should still be fun for you, regardless of if you know the players or not. 20 years from now, the football players may not be as known. I know Blair Walsh and his one amazing season. The amazing play of Josh Cribbs in the return game. These are all things I value from football past. But this show is not defined by the football. It's the sheer relatability of playing fantasy sports, football specifically in this case, with a bunch of crazy competitive, I guess we can call friends. The running jokes are endless, and I'm just going to list a few off. Vinegar strokes, capturing a man's vinegar strokes, and I feel like I'll take a quick divergent here. Vinegar strokes in the show is defined as the face you make before you climax, right? And they come up with these things where it's like, oh, and you hold some vinegar, you make this face, and that's your face. Like, what is that? They just ran with it. I didn't make up Eskimo Brothers, but that's a trend. That's seemingly how Taco gets around for most everything he does, but that's a thing that's existed, but this show, I think, probably brought it into the forefront of the average viewer of FX or FXX eventually, which it aired on. Forever Uncleeaaann from Nick Kroll. That's one that I might still use. In the Cloud for Taco always getting high. Yo Bagoya, I'll let that one be a surprise. I said it wrong. Netflix, where they're talking about one of his better ideas of delivering ties. That joke may not even hit anymore because people don't get their DVDs delivered anymore. It's all digital. It's all on the cloud. I mean, think of it like people would think of Blockbuster. You remember Blockbuster? You went with the family, you picked up maybe 3 or 4 DVDs at a time, but you had to convince them that a movie was a family movie so you could get another one. That's what I did. I love Blockbuster. No one's going to get those references. When they had a Blockbuster reference in Captain Marvel, I loved it, but not everyone's going to have that reaction. Think of the same way as Netflix. People aren't going to be getting their DVDs delivered from that service from Netflix anymore. Everything is digital. It's just a different time. But gosh, don't we love Blockbuster? Remember that? What a fun family time or date trip. Gosh, R.I.P. to Blockbuster. Sorry, I got a little choked up there thinking about it. Roster baiting, that one's self-explanatory, Mr. McGiblets, and just so many more. If you've watched this show, you get it. If you haven't, get ready for some weird inside jokes. Really, the only thing I would say comparable to this is like Blue Mountain State, where there's some jokes that are just filthy, disgusting. There's a football setting. Obviously, in Blue Mountain State, it's all fictional. It's at a college. But I get that same vibe of just these horrid inside jokes that are so funny. There's no other way to put it. But back to the league. Beside the weird jokes, beside the football, it's a sitcom that focuses on a group of guy friends. I remember growing up watching Disney movies. I really related to Hercules and Lion King and like Aladdin because they were mostly focused. They had a lead guy protagonist, which wasn't super available to Disney movies. It was the Princess Spoon, which now I appreciate way more than I did as a kid. By the time, wasn't for me. I think of The League the same way. The League is a guy-focused sitcom. How many of those are there out there that are a group of guys, not focused on relationships? Just throwing it out there. I don't need love in every sitcom I watch. I don't need that as a part of my life. Just saying, that's where I'm at as a person. That's fine, just what it is. But think of this show as the Hercules equivalent of a Disney movie for sitcoms. You have to watch the holiday episodes. They do Thanksgiving episodes almost as well as Bob Burgers. Not as good, but almost well. And part of that's because football and Thanksgiving go hand in hand. Like cranberry sauce and whatever else other people eat for Thanksgiving. I don't know what other people eat besides the cranberry sauce. That's the big one, right? Isn't that all that really you need for Thanksgiving dinner to be complete? And you never know when Mr. McGiblets will come up with any holiday episode. It could be a Christmas one where he's being Krampus. It could be a Halloween one trying to scare someone in what's supposed to be a child mascot outfit. It's just perfect, Mr. McGiblets existing in this world of the League. And even like now as I'm recording it, I'm just remembering other random inside jokes. The slotty receivers from Jenny's lineup. It's just a show that has timely references for the time, but the jokes are amazing and are timeless. And they're beautiful. And all the taco musical numbers, they scratch that musical kid itch from me. Look, Fiddler on the Roof, I get it. That was years ago. Gosh, I mean, my Fiddler on the Roof experience was 2006, I think. That was ages ago. This is the last time I was in a musical. But I love some little musical hints in my media. And the League doesn't need to be the most musical thing in the world, but there are those moments with those really weird taco songs, and that's something he excels in. That's why he was so perfect for this role, because of his musical comedy songs. This show was perfection in seasons 1 to 3, feeling pretty true to formula, but always being able to be creative, weird, over the top, fun, and finding new ways to make a ton of new jokes while still honoring the storylines of old and continuing the recurring jokes I love. Around season 4, things got a little bit stranger, and this kind of really ramped up in 5 to 7. And I remember not always wanting an episode that did not have as much to do with fantasy football. But this show ensnares you. It brings you into this world of these degenerate friend group, and you grow to just care about their stories and what random things they get up to or end up doing with each other, or more likely in this show, to each other. Glee is a show that I remember had a great season 1. And after that, either you had great music and songs or a great plot. You couldn't do both. I never understood it, but you always knew. Oh, wow, this song's pretty good. Rough plot episode. Wow, this story's really good. Terrible music. I stopped watching and should probably dive back in one day. That'll probably be an episode eventually. But the League finds a way to go off the beaten path, take a walk. Have some more football-focused episodes and issues, but then take a right turn. They'd sprinkle in a more character development episode, focusing on 2 of the guys. One or more family-driven episodes about where Kevin and Jenny's daughter Ellie picked up her foul language from. It shows you the people at their absolute worst, grossest moments. It does not shy away from that, and even though it's over the top, it feels just authentic because it does not censor anything. It's as foul as it can get without being on HBO or Showtime. think like Walking Dead level gore on AMC is fine, but up to a point, certain things aren't fine. And that's how I feel like the level of crass is allowed on this FXXX show. You gotta love how raw it can be. That is kind of engaging for a viewer, seeing how flawed they all are. It's almost humanizing more than any fun, friendly, run-of-the-mill sitcom. This show really just entices you with a fantasy football sitcom, and you stay to see how all these just terrible people interact and backstab each other, but with the lowest of stakes compared to war shows or crime shows. But to these primarily 6 fantasy football players, the stakes could not be any higher. Winning this 8-team league with 2 to 3 random people, which is pretty weak numbers game. Yeah, I had that size my first year, and I was offended by J.J. Watt making fun of that size. So we got up to 12, thankfully. But those are the highest stakes in the world to these people. There's no massive amount of money displayed about this. It's a pride thing. It's obscene bragging rights for the winner. But as goes the winner, so goes the loser, and their utter humiliation for the last place member. Gosh, I need to not come in last place in my league this year, and that's not from the show, that's me. I am that concerned about my fantasy football team. I can't speak enough, though. Back to the show. Let's talk about my personal fantasy football woes. I can't speak enough about how much I love this show. It is sitting at an 8.2 right now on IMDb. And we all need to make this a yearly or bi-yearly rewatch for the league to coincide with the real football and, more importantly, fantasy football seasons. Gosh, I really need my fantasy season to pick up. I'm recording this as I'm seeing the horrors that Thursday Night Football did on me. I'm just having a rough year this year. But the fictional football comedy season, it picks me up a little bit. It brings you back up. But unlike Draft Day, where it's fake football players in a real football world, this is a fake story with real NFL ties to it. Is it a documentary? No, of course not. But having Adrian Peterson hooking up with the girl who broke Pete's heart, having Jerry Jones have to reback Cowboys.com from Taco. These are things that are just part of the world. It's beautiful. I mean, I love those things that really make it feel realized and authentic. I will say, while there is no official talk with production the way it is based on quarantine life, but football, friends being terrible to each other, those things will never go out of style. I have an idea, and I'm curious what y'all think of it. What if this cast came back in some way with a pandemic as part of the story? Trash talking and interacting over Zoom, it could be amazing. With the jokes and seeing the friend groups bond over football while dealing with being in their own homes and stuck with their families. It could be a fun, almost therapeutic way to see what quarantine is like through characters in a fictional world. Maybe this show can bring that realize we are not alone in this pandemic, because that's the toughest thing, right? We feel alone. We're either quarantined with some friends, siblings, significant others, or a lot of people are just by themselves. It's tough. You can FaceTime as much as you want, but it's tough. Wouldn't it be nice if our media could show this? And there are some sitcom-y whatever shows that are coming out. Maybe they'll be fine. I don't know. I think I saw one that had Sarah Paulson, so I like Sarah Paulson, obviously. But what if this show could be like Hard Knocks? And not, let me explain what I mean. This year of Hard Knocks focused on the LA Rams and the LA Chargers. 2 teams going through this pandemic. It was a documentary series on an HBO Max now, and you kind of saw the humanizing and almost the relatability of going through a pandemic while doing your work. And yes, is there a football aspect to it? Of course. That's why we watch Hard Knocks to begin with. But seeing them going through these challenging times with COVID, with everything else going on in the world, and that relatability to dealing with this. Imagine that with our sitcom. And not just, the friends on the couch are now the friends on the Zoom. I want the trash talking, the really weird inside jokes, just the camaraderie of people who aren't just friends. They're friends who loathe each other and would do anything for this fantasy football trophy. And folks, isn't that what it's all about? And I will say, while this is not anything confirming anything, in the summer of 2019, a few members of the cast all had a 10-year anniversary for the show starting and airing. Many members of the cast today would be open to a revival overall. That's not confirming anything, but being open to it is a start. Look, I loved Agent Carter when it came out and it ended. There's rumors that she's going to be back, and not just in the Marvel what if thing, in real people form. Anything can happen now. There's so many shows that get rebrought. Who would have thought the Justice League thing would have happened? I'm just saying, if anything can happen, as far as production costs and overhead go, this doesn't feel like that crazy. Is Nick Kroll super busy? Yeah, a lot of these people are probably super busy with work. I just think of Nick Kroll because of Big Mouth, which has a huge chunk of seasons and episodes that it still has been renewed for. But anything's possible, and I think this show was such a gem and so unique for what it is. Really, as I said it, I didn't even think about it before. Blue Mountain State is the only thing that I think comes close to what this show is and was. But just imagine if it could all come out with the same cast 10 years later, still having that toxic, competitive nature that we all love to watch and be a part of from a distance. Well, hey, another episode in the books. Fives. That was the fives. It might be one of the shorter ones, but hopefully that just means you can start watching the league on Hulu ASAP. The 20-ish minute episodes are quick and easy to consume. They are light in nature, super weird, combine sports with super quirky reoccurring jokes, and mostly 13 episode seasons. The first season was only 6 episodes. It's a quick binge, but it can last you for a good chunk of the football season. If you want some more gridiron goodness after the games are done on Saturday and Sunday, do the league. It's not the worst way to spend your time if you want another football fix. So guys, I'm going to put a call to you. I want to know your favorite episode of the league. Your favorite recurring joke, memory, moment, character, whatever. It could be with the league, but also, let's hear some fantasy football stories. I've told you all a few. I've had some rough seasons to go of it. I've also had some great ones. Who would have got Cam Newton after having the worst week 1? I won the season that year because of being so bad my first week. Gosh, I love fantasy football. Can't make a podcast on it because my credentials are going out the window a little bit, but I'd love to hear. And guys, as I've told you, I am having a rough year. If you have any fancy tips, I will take those too. I drafted 12th this year. It was a garbage year for me in fantasy, and we're only a few weeks into the season. But as I said, sadly I'm on my way, most likely, to 0-3. We're going to tell me all these things about the league or fantasy football? Hit me up on social. Knick-Knack IC, Knick-Knack Movies, whatever strikes your fancy. And guys, we are available on so many podcast platforms. I just have sent out 2 more to new directories. We're on iHeart, Amazon now. We're almost everywhere. Still working on Pandora, but we will get there, okay? There is no reason to not take a listen to our full slate of episodes. You could listen on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Amazon Music has now very recently brought podcasts to the forefront. It's a pretty cool site. I looked it over. I appreciated it. And we're available just about everywhere you listen to podcasts. Take a listen, write a review, 5 stars, let us know what's up. Make me the podcast fantasy champion that y'all know I am. You've been listening for a bit. Give me some props. Just saying. But before we go, thank you. Thank you to the listeners. We are still going strong. This has been an absolute blast so far. Coming to you from my newly refurbished podcast recording space. And as always, let's thank the host of our podcast, Buzzsprout. Couldn't do it without them. Well, this has been another episode. Knick-Knack Goes to the Movies. And as always, until next time, cinephiles.
Are you not entertained? I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.